Hello there, my sleep fellows. Welcome to another quiet tale from the magical world of Hogwarts, a place where secrets live in candlelight, and even the most ordinary evenings can hold stories waiting to be whispered. Tonight, we follow a gentle mystery. The time Dumbledore was seen not once, but twice in two different places within the same quiet hour. But don't worry, there are no dark spells here, no duels or danger. Just a peaceful puzzle wrapped in candlelight, stone walls, and soft footsteps echoing through enchanted corridors. Before we begin this slow adventure, let yourself take a deep breath. Feel the world ease around you. If you enjoy relaxing stories from Hogwarts, you're welcome to gently like this video or subscribe to drift along more magical journeys with us. You might even peek into our collection of cozy tales waiting to lull you into the arms of sleep. But for now, let's return to the soft magic of this night. It begins in the soft hours of twilight, where the last golden rays of sun press lazily against the turrets of Hogwarts Castle. A breeze drifts through the long grass of the grounds, rustling the leaves of the whomping willow, but tonight, even it stands calm, its great limbs motionless in the hush of evening. Inside the castle, torches flicker along the ancient stone corridors, casting golden light onto dusty tapestries and the faces of sleeping portraits. Down in the great hall, the long tables have been cleared of dinner, and a few scattered students still linger with cups of hot pumpkin cider. The enchanted ceiling above shows a sleepy sky, twinkling stars just beginning to pierce the deepening blue, and a sliver of moon curling into sight. From the kitchens far below, faint clinks and clatters echo up from the house. Elves tidying dishes, their work gentle and familiar. Somewhere high in the towers, an owl flaps lazily to its perch. In the library, Madame Pince tucks a forgotten book back into its place. And in a quiet corner near the Transfiguration classroom, a single lantern glows beside a window seat, where our story will begin. There, where silence feels soft and time seems to slow, we step gently into the folds of a tale that begins not with a bang, but with a question, a sighting, a whisper, because tonight, someone saw Professor Dumbledore heading toward the astronomy tower, and only 10 minutes later, someone else swears they saw him walking calmly through the entrance hall, and both claim, without doubt, that it was truly him. But how can one wizard be in two places at once? Settle in, and let's quietly find out. As the candlelight flickers across the gentle curves of the old castle's walls, we are drawn into a quiet corner of Hogwarts, where the night holds more than just shadows. There, among stone arches and soft whispering portraits, are 4 students, each unknowingly bound to the mystery that waits beyond a hidden door. First, there's Luna Lovegood. Her presence is like the hush of snowflakes brushing a window pane. With wide, unblinking eyes and a dreamy voice, she walks the world just slightly apart from it. Luna notices what others miss, the tilt of a floorboard that hums when stepped on, the odd rhythm of dust motes caught in a sunbeam. She believes in strange things, impossible things, and beautiful things, and it is often in her quiet certainty that the magic of Hogwarts finds its boldest mirror. Tonight, as she hums softly to herself by the fire, she already senses that something is different. Not wrong, just hidden. Beside her sits Neville Longbottom, kind-hearted and gentle, though often unsure of his place. There's a strength in Neville now, grown through years of quiet struggle. He carries a small notebook tucked into his robes, filled with sketches of plants, tiny observations, and words he dares not speak aloud. Neville doesn't believe he's brave like the others, but there's a reason the Sorting Hat saw the lion in his heart. His eyes flick toward the hallway tonight with an odd sense of pull, as if something familiar and forgotten waits for him in the silence. On the far side of the common room, Ginny Weasley leans against the frame of the fireplace, her arms folded and her brow slightly furrowed. Ginny is flame and calm all at once. She's no stranger to secrets or strange magic. Though she doesn't often speak of the diary from her first year, the lessons from that time have made her quietly fearless. She doesn't flinch at mystery. She walks into it. And when the puzzle begins to stir, it is Ginny's instinct to step forward first. And finally, trailing in from the hallway with his tie half undone and his eyes scanning the ceiling for moving staircases, comes Ron Weasley. Ever the loyal friend, often the reluctant hero, Ron isn't searching for a mystery tonight. He's searching for the last biscuit he swears he left by his bed. But the castle has its ways, and sometimes it leads even the most unsuspecting souls into stories meant just for them. Ron may grumble, may stumble, but when the door appears, he won't be the one to turn away. Together, they form a curious constellation, each one shining in their own quiet way, each one about to step unknowingly into a place that was never meant to exist. A dormitory that shouldn't be there, a room untouched by time, full of whispers, dreams, and stories waiting to remember themselves. And so, the story begins, not with a bang or a flicker of great magic, but with 4 hearts quietly beating in the night, and a castle that sighs as it opens one more hidden door. It was a quiet Thursday evening, and the sky over Hogwarts was a soft shade of lilac, fading into blue as the last of the daylight slipped behind the mountains. The castle, so often filled with bustling footsteps and laughter, now seemed to hold its breath. Lanterns glowed like fireflies in the long stone corridors, casting pools of golden warmth on the worn flagstones. The soft crackle of hearth fires echoed through the halls, blending with the occasional hoot of an owl returning to the owlery or the rustle of parchment as students finished their homework. In the Gryffindor common room, Ron Weasley lounged in one of the squashy armchairs, one sock half pulled off, his eyes beginning to flutter closed as the fire warmed his feet. Luna Lovegood sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping through a copy of The Quibbler, pausing every now and then to stare thoughtfully at the flames. Neville was perched at the desk in the corner, carefully pruning a small potted plant with twitching leaves, murmuring softly as if coaxing it to rest for the night. And Ginny was curled up on the windowsill, her cheek pressed against the cool glass, watching the stars slowly blink into being. Everything felt safe, familiar, peaceful, until it didn't. It started so simply, so gently, that it could have been missed entirely. A soft hum, just a note, barely there, like the memory of a lullaby sung long ago. It wasn't coming from the fire or the wind outside, but from somewhere in between. Luna looked up first, her head tilting slightly, as if hearing something the others could not. "Do you hear that?" she asked softly, not looking at anyone in particular. Neville paused his pruning. "Hear what?" "That sound, like a bell, underwater." Ginny turned from the window, brows knitting in quiet curiosity. "I don't hear anything." Ron yawned. "Probably one of those enchanted teapots again. Fred and George charmed a bunch to sing lullabies, gave one to Mum. She nearly hexed it." But Luna wasn't laughing. Her pale eyes were fixed on the corridor beyond the portrait hole, the corridor that led to the headmaster's tower. Slowly, she stood and drifted to the entrance, her slippers barely making a sound on the rug. "Wait, Luna?" Ginny stood too, exchanging a glance with Neville. "I think someone's calling," Luna said quietly. "Not with words, but something's asking to be found." None of them wanted to say it was odd. Odd wasn't a word they used much around Luna, but even Neville felt the small hairs on his arm rise. Something about the quiet hum made the castle feel different, as though it were waiting. "All right," Ron muttered, tugging his sock back on. "But if we get caught wandering the halls after curfew, I'm blaming the singing teapots." The group followed Luna through the now dim corridor, lit only by the faintest glimmer of floating lanterns and the occasional sleepy whisper from the castle walls. The hum grew a little stronger with each step, not loud, never alarming, just enough to guide their feet. It didn't lead them to the headmaster's tower, as they half expected, but to a landing near the 7th floor, a place where the air seemed to shimmer, and then it happened. As they turned a corner, Luna stopped and gasped, not with fear, but with wonder. There, walking slowly across the corridor ahead of them, was Albus Dumbledore. Not unusual, perhaps, for the headmaster to roam the castle, but the thing was, just 10 minutes ago, Ron had seen Dumbledore speaking with Professor McGonagall down in the entrance hall, and he'd seemed very real there too. Tall, calm, his half-moon spectacles catching the candlelight as he spoke. This Dumbledore, however, looked slightly faded, not like a ghost, but not quite solid either. His robes shimmered faintly, as though catching light from a source that wasn't there, and most curiously, he didn't seem to notice them at all. He paused at a section of blank stone wall just beside an old tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, tilted his head slightly, as if listening for a silent knock, and then he stepped forward, right through the wall, not through a door, not a secret panel, through solid stone, and then he was gone. The group stood frozen for a moment. Ron blinked. Did anyone else just see Dumbledore? Ginny whispered, but not quite Dumbledore. Neville stepped forward, reaching out to touch the wall where the headmaster had vanished. It was cool and solid, unyielding, just stone. Luna pressed her palm against it and closed her eyes. "It remembers," she murmured, "even if it was forgotten." The others exchanged glances. "It looked like a memory," Neville said quietly, "but not like the ones in the Pensieve. It was here." Ron scratched his head. "Okay, either we've all fallen asleep in front of the fire, or this castle's trying to show us something." "No," Luna said, still pressing her hand to the wall. "It's not a dream. It's an echo." Ginny narrowed her eyes. "An echo of what?" "Of something that was supposed to happen," Luna replied, her voice soft and certain, "and still might." They spent the next few minutes gently inspecting the wall, looking for a seam, a shimmer, a hinge. But there was nothing. No movement, just a silent stretch of stone that had moments ago let through the echo of a man they all trusted, twice. Finally, Neville leaned back and rubbed his hands together for warmth. "So what now?" Luna smiled faintly. "We wait. It will come again." Ron gave a tired laugh. "Brilliant. A wall that shows Dumbledore's ghostly twin and no instructions. Very Hogwarts." They didn't tell anyone, of course. Who would believe them? And besides, something about it felt personal, like a secret shared not by accident, but with purpose. Back in the common room, the fire had burned low. The chairs felt just as warm, but their eyes lingered on shadows that hadn't seemed so deep before. That night, Ginny sat awake the longest, listening to the silence around her, a silence that now felt filled, as if the castle had begun whispering something long unsaid. And in a hallway high above, beside a wall with no door, a faint glow pulsed once, then faded, waiting for the next curious eyes to look deeper, waiting for the quiet story to unfold. It had been 3 nights since they'd seen him. Dumbledore, yet not Dumbledore, walking silently through the 7th floor corridor, shimmering faintly, and then vanishing through the stone wall as if it were mist. Since then, the corridor had been quiet, undisturbed, no ghostly echoes, no strange humming, just stone, still and silent, like any other part of the castle. But something had changed in those who had witnessed it. Luna remained thoughtful and dreamy, though her eyes now seemed to linger longer on shadows that bent oddly or lanterns that flickered at the wrong time. Neville had begun carrying a small notebook, sketching the section of wall in detail, making notes as if the pattern of the stones might whisper a secret if studied long enough. Ron was restless, cracking jokes a little louder than usual, as though trying to shake off the oddness of what they'd seen. And Ginny had become more observant, watching the people around her, especially Dumbledore himself, for any sign of something repeated. They hadn't spoken of it again in the open, not even to Harry or Hermione, not because they were hiding something, but because it felt like something that needed to be kept gentle, quiet, as if saying too much would scare it away. Then, one softly raining evening, the second twist came. It began with a whisper, literally. Luna was sitting by herself in the library's back corner, tracing her finger along the spine of an old herbology text when she heard it. A whisper, not in English, not in any tongue she recognized, but it wasn't coming from the books. It was coming from the air. Just above her shoulder, a low murmur, like someone trying to remember a song without singing it aloud. She looked up, startled, but the space was empty. Rows of books, quiet tables, the occasional scratching of a quill. She waited. The whisper came again, not threatening, not insistent, just present. She stood, tucked the book under her arm, and followed it. This time, the others were in separate corners of the castle. Ron was napping in the common room. Ginny was practicing charms in an empty classroom, and Neville was tending to the school's greenhouse after hours. Yet one by one, they each began to feel it too. A pull, not a sound this time, but a feeling, as if the castle itself was gently nudging them, not with hands, but with quiet memory. They each began to feel strangely drawn to different parts of the school. Luna to the upper library, Ron to a window overlooking the astronomy tower, Ginny to the trophy room, Neville to the hallway near the room of requirement. None of them knew why, but each followed, and each in their own way saw a glimpse. Ron, gazing through the fogged-up window, saw Dumbledore standing still beneath the astronomy tower's arch, again shimmering faintly, again alone, again unaware of being seen. The headmaster raised a hand, slowly, as if greeting someone unseen, and then faded into the mist. Ginny, alone in the trophy room, watched as a glimmer moved across the glass cases. The reflection of Dumbledore passed behind her, though she had not turned, though no door had opened. He walked slowly, peacefully, his eyes lowered, his robes making no sound. And then he was gone. Neville, kneeling beside a flowering shrub, glanced up to see a shape just beyond the greenhouse's glass wall. Dumbledore again. Not walking, standing still as stone, but with a light, not from the moon, resting gently around his form, like someone who had been remembered so strongly he had been called back by thought alone. And Luna, in the library, saw not just a shape, but a place. As she walked past a tall stack of books, her hand brushing the dusty bindings, the air shimmered, and for the briefest second, the world shifted, the bookshelves disappeared, the wooden floors vanished, and she stood, just for a heartbeat, in a room she had never seen before. A circular chamber lined with soft green tapestries, a single chair in the center. A domed ceiling above that looked like a starry night sky, though no light came from it. And standing in that room was Dumbledore, facing away, silent. Then the room vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and she was back in the library, her hand still resting on the same book as though she had never left. But she had. That night, they all came together once more, without planning to, without speaking. Each found themselves drifting toward the same place, the 7th floor corridor, the place where they had first seen him, drawn not by fear or even curiosity, but by something softer, a need to understand. "I think he's trying to show us something," Ginny said quietly. "I don't think he even knows he's doing it," Neville replied, looking up at the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. "Maybe it's not him," Ron added. "Maybe it's the castle showing us memories of him, pieces that are stuck." Luna sat cross-legged on the floor. "There's something about that room," she murmured. "The one I saw. It's not in any of the maps. It's not a classroom. It's not a place anyone talks about, but I saw it. I know it's real." "A room the castle doesn't speak of," Ginny whispered. "That sounds very Hogwarts." Neville frowned. "But why now? Why us?" "Maybe," Luna said slowly, "because we listened." The wall in front of them remained still, ordinary, but now they all knew it wasn't, not truly. Ginny stepped closer to it, pressed her palm to the stone. "It's like it's remembering," she said, "trying to remember itself, like the magic here has dreams too." And then, without warning, the wall began to glow, softly, like a breath taken in. A circle of pale silver light traced itself against the stone, forming a gentle arch. Not a door, not yet, just the outline of one. It shimmered, then held still like a lantern's glow in the fog. They all stood silently. The air felt warmer now, and yet heavier too, as if the castle's breath had slowed, deepened, grown thoughtful. "No one touches it," Ron said softly, surprising even himself with the gentleness in his voice. "Not yet," Luna agreed. Ginny stared at the silver outline. "It's waiting." "Waiting for what?" asked Neville. Luna smiled faintly. "For the moment to be remembered properly, not solved, not opened, just understood." And with that, the glow faded, not like a door being slammed shut, but like a candle slowly going out, not lost, just resting. The four friends stood there for a long moment, not speaking, and somewhere within the very stones of the castle, the hum returned, a soft tune, wordless and quiet. Like the castle was humming to itself, a lullaby of old magic, of old memories, of a time that hadn't finished unfolding. They didn't know what would come next, only that something had begun, something gentle, something magical, and something that remembered them even as they tried to understand it. A second whisper had found them, and now the story was truly beginning. The following evening arrived wrapped in a soft, silvery calm. A light mist drifted through the grounds, clinging gently to the stone steps and curling around the lower towers, as though Hogwarts itself were settling into a thoughtful mood. Inside the castle, lamps glowed low and warm, their light stretching lazily across corridors that seemed older and quieter than usual. It was the kind of night when footsteps naturally slowed, when even whispered conversations felt too loud. Ron noticed it first. Not the mist, not the silence, but the feeling that the castle was paying attention. He felt it as he walked past the suits of armor near the entrance hall. Their visors reflected his face back at him, slightly warped, slightly delayed, as though time itself had hesitated. He stopped, blinked, and shook his head with a quiet laugh. "Getting tired," he muttered to himself. "That's all." But as he turned away, he caught sight of a familiar figure at the far end of the hall. Tall, calm, silver-bearded Professor Dumbledore. The headmaster stood near the foot of the marble staircase, hands folded behind his back, gazing up toward the moving steps with an expression Ron couldn't quite read. It wasn't stern, it wasn't distracted, it was reflective, as though Dumbledore were remembering something fond and distant at the same time. Ron's heart gave a small, startled jump, not out of fear, just surprise. "Evening, Professor," he called softly. Dumbledore didn't respond. Ron took a step closer, then another. The lanterns flickered faintly, their flames bending as if stirred by an invisible breath. And then, slowly, unmistakably, Dumbledore began to fade. Not vanishing in a rush, not disappearing like a ghost, but thinning, like mist dissolving into moonlight, until the space where he stood was empty once more. Ron stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, the echo of his own voice still lingering in the air. At the same moment, in a completely different part of the castle, Ginny Weasley felt a similar quiet shift. She had been walking alone near the trophy room, enjoying the rare peace of an empty corridor, when she noticed the reflections in the glass cases changing. The trophies, engraved cups, golden plates, silver shields, no longer reflected just her red hair and school robes. They reflected someone else. Dumbledore. He appeared behind her, moving slowly, almost thoughtfully, his reflection perfectly clear in the polished surfaces. Ginny turned sharply. No one was there. She turned back to the glass, and there he was again, walking calmly past the trophies, his reflection gliding from case to case like a memory replaying itself. He paused once, just once, lifting his hand to rest it against the glass of an old Quidditch plaque, his eyes soft with something like pride. Then the reflection faded. Ginny exhaled slowly, her heart steady but alert. She didn't feel frightened. She felt invited. High above, near the library's upper levels, Luna Lovegood sat perched on a window ledge, watching the mist curl across the grounds below. She had been humming quietly to herself when the air beside her shimmered. This time, Dumbledore did not appear as a figure crossing a corridor. This time, he was already there. He stood beside her, gazing out the window, his outline faint but gentle, like a reflection on water. Luna did not startle. She did not gasp. She simply smiled. "Hello again," she said dreamily. Dumbledore did not look at her, but the air felt warmer, fuller, as though acknowledging her presence. His eyes followed the mist drifting across the lake, and for a moment, Luna felt as if she were standing inside a memory rather than the present. Then she noticed something else. The stars outside the window were wrong. Not gone, just repeating. A familiar constellation shimmered once, then shimmered again, slightly out of place, as though the night sky itself had folded over on itself. Time, she realized, wasn't broken. It was overlapping. "Oh," she whispered, "you're not lost at all." The figure beside her slowly faded, leaving behind only the quiet hum that had become strangely familiar. Down near the greenhouses, Neville Longbottom felt the earth shift beneath his feet, not physically, but magically. He had been watering a row of mooncalf lilies when the shadows stretched in an unusual way, lengthening toward him despite the steady lamplight. He looked up. Dumbledore stood just outside the glass, framed by mist and moonlight, his form faint but unmistakable. Neville's chest tightened, not with fear, but with a deep, unexpected sense of reassurance. This was the man who had once placed the sorting hat on his head, who had believed in him even when Neville hadn't believed in himself. Dumbledore raised his wand slightly, not in greeting, not in warning, but as though marking a moment in time. Then he was gone. The greenhouse returned to normal. The shadows relaxed. The lilies glowed softly once more. Neville set the watering can down with careful hands. By the time the four of them found their way back to the 7th floor corridor, none of them were surprised to see each other there. It felt natural, inevitable, as though the castle itself had gently gathered them. They stood beneath the familiar tapestry, the stone wall before them silent and plain. "He's not just appearing anymore," Ron said quietly. "He's repeating." Ginny nodded. "In reflections, in places tied to memory. Time isn't moving wrong," Neville added slowly. "It's remembering wrong, or maybe too well." Luna tilted her head, listening to the faint hum beneath the silence. "I think it's neither. I think it's doing exactly what it's meant to do." They stood together as the air began to warm once more. A faint silver glow traced itself along the stones, not forming a doorway yet, not opening anything, but outlining something that had always been there and had simply waited. A pause in time, a place between moments. The glow pulsed once, gently, like a heartbeat, and in that pulse, they understood. This wasn't a warning. It wasn't a mistake. It was a memory echoing forward, a moment Dumbledore himself had once stepped through, preserved not by spellwork, but by intention. A safeguard, a reminder, a quiet gift left behind by a wizard who understood that some lessons could only be learned slowly. The light faded again, leaving the wall unchanged, but the castle no longer felt the same. Something had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. And somewhere within Hogwarts, time folded softly over itself once more, waiting for the next gentle step forward. The days that followed the discovery of the hidden dormitory unfolded like pages in an ancient book, gently, quietly, with a magical hush that blanketed the castle in mystery. Harry, Ron, and Hermione returned to their classes, carrying the secret of the strange hallway like a silent companion that tugged at the edge of their thoughts. The dormitory hadn't vanished, but it hadn't reappeared either. Its door remained absent during the day, and only in the hush of deep night did it sometimes flicker into view. They had agreed not to tell others just yet, not because they wanted to keep it all to themselves, but because they weren't sure how to explain it. Even Dumbledore, if asked, might have given them one of his elusive smiles and said, "Hogwarts has a way of remembering what others forget." So instead, the trio began quietly exploring the mystery themselves, choosing late nights, timed steps, and moments between patrols when even the portraits were sleeping. Each night, they hoped the dormitory would appear, and some nights it did, flickering in like a memory remembering itself. Inside, the enchanted dormitory always looked slightly different. The number of beds changed, the portraits rearranged themselves, the fireplace sometimes burned blue instead of gold. One night, the chandelier was shaped like swirling leaves, and another, it mimicked stars slowly turning in an enchanted night sky. Each version felt familiar, like a reflection of something deep within them, but also different, as though the room adjusted to their moods or intentions. Ron found a quilt stitched with what looked like his childhood drawings of Chudley Cannon's logos. Hermione once opened a drawer and found a copy of a book she'd lost in second year, its corners still dog-eared in the same place. Harry, on one visit, found a small wooden toy, one he hadn't seen since before he was brought to the Dursleys. "Is it reacting to us?" Hermione whispered one night as they sat together in the flickering quiet of the room. Harry nodded slowly. "I think it remembers us. Not just us now, but who we were, who we might have been." The enchantments weren't loud. There were no explosions, no soaring spells, no ghosts jumping out from behind curtains. The magic here felt old, not in age, but in emotion. It felt like a place that listened, but as they visited more, a gentle tension began to rise, one that didn't disturb the peace but wrapped itself around their questions like ivy. One evening, they found a locked drawer in a wardrobe that hadn't been there before. It bore no keyhole, just a tiny, delicate silver inlay of a sleeping dragon curled around a crescent moon. It glowed faintly when Harry touched it, but did not open. "That's new," Ron said, crouching beside it. "Maybe it's waiting," Hermione murmured. But waiting for what? The question lingered, unanswered. Another night, they found a new painting hanging in the corner. It hadn't been there before, and it didn't speak, as most portraits did. Instead, it showed three blurred figures standing in a vast field, looking at a hidden doorway set into a hillside. As they stared, the painting shimmered slightly, and the doorway in the picture flickered with soft candlelight. "Are those meant to be us?" Harry asked, unsure. "It doesn't quite look like us," Ron replied, "but it also does." That night, none of them could sleep, not out of fear, but wonder. The castle felt alive with a secret that tiptoed just ahead of them, like a riddle in motion. Soon, small magical traces began appearing outside the room. Footsteps that didn't belong to them, barely visible in dust or water from a leaky pipe. A faint humming sound in the corridor where the room sometimes appeared, too musical for plumbing, too soft for Filch. Once they heard laughter, faint, distant, childlike, yet no one else was there. Hermione began checking old floor plans of the castle in the library, most dated back centuries. She searched for mention of a missing dormitory, a forgotten house, even an experiment in magical architecture, but all the records were frustratingly vague. Some mentioned a seventh wing that was never built. Others hinted at an experimental charm for lost spaces, but no one had written what it meant. "I think Hogwarts used to have something here," she said one evening in the library, spreading out scrolls and pages on the table. "Something unfinished, or maybe something that was meant to be hidden." Harry looked over the floor plan again, or something meant to appear only when it was needed. That idea sank in quietly between them. Was the room answering a call they hadn't made aloud? One night, while walking alone after a late prefect meeting, Hermione saw the flicker of the door again, just for a moment. She hesitated, looked around the silent corridor, and stepped closer. The door appeared. She touched the handle. Inside, the room glowed gently, but instead of its usual warmth, it seemed dimmer, not unfriendly, just quieter, as though it too was unsure. Hermione took a breath, sat on the nearest bed, and whispered, "Who are you meant for?" She didn't expect an answer, but the chandelier above her shifted gently, its light forming soft patterns on the wall, a memory perhaps, or a dream. Shapes of children studying, laughing, gathering quietly together. Then it faded. She left, her heart beating softly but quickly, and told Harry and Ron the next day. "It's not just reacting to us," she said. "It's showing us things, feelings, pieces." Over the next few nights, the trio tried different things, bringing books, old photos, items from their trunks. The room responded subtly. A music box Hermione had once owned as a child appeared on a table, playing a lullaby she hadn't heard in years. A pair of old slippers Ron remembered from his first Christmas at Hogwarts appeared beside the bed. Even Hedwig's cage, long gone, once shimmered into view before fading softly again. But it wasn't only nostalgia. There was something else, a thread they were following, an unseen path leading them deeper into the castle's heart. Every object, every change in the dormitory was gently pointing somewhere, not just to the past, but toward an understanding. Understanding what, though? That was still hidden. One night they all stood in the room together, looking at the glowing silver drawer once again, still locked, still silent. Ron sighed. "So, are we supposed to do something? Say something?" Harry stepped forward and quietly said, "We're listening." The drawer glowed a little brighter. Just then, the fireplace flared, not dangerously, but with sudden clarity. The flames danced in shapes, not random ones, but images: the forbidden forest, the lake, the castle under construction, and then a boy wearing Hogwarts robes, but from a much older era. He looked lonely, thoughtful, watching from a distance. The flames stilled, and then all returned to normal. Hermione spoke softly. "I think someone's memories are stored here. Someone who was forgotten," Harry added. "But not by the castle," Ron said. The room stayed quiet, but it no longer felt like silence. It felt like waiting, patient, gentle, hopeful. Whatever this dormitory was, whoever it belonged to, it had chosen them. Not because they were famous or clever, but because they listened, because they asked, because they cared enough to see what others passed by. And in that hush, Hogwarts seemed to hum with approval. The dormitory wasn't just a puzzle, it was a whisper, a story, a forgotten promise still held safe within ancient stone and gentle magic, waiting to be remembered. As the days quietly turned into weeks, the hidden dormitory became a place of ritual. Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't just stumble upon it anymore. They sought it out, with care, almost reverence. The dormitory had begun to feel less like a mystery and more like a companion, offering not answers, but calm. In a castle full of corridors, this room offered stillness. Each evening, after the rest of Hogwarts had dimmed its lanterns and drifted off to sleep, the trio would tiptoe past familiar halls and whisper through the shadows. They didn't always find the door. Sometimes the corridor was just a corridor, but on the nights when it appeared, quiet and patient, they felt as though the room had missed them. This time, when the door appeared, it was just before midnight. The air held that gentle hush unique to winter evenings, soft and chilled, with every footstep echoing like it didn't want to disturb the dreaming portraits. Hermione hesitated before opening the door. "This time, let's each try something different," she said softly. "Let's listen not with answers, but with choices. What we decide to do may matter more than what we figure out." Inside, the dormitory felt warmer than usual. The beds glowed with golden light, and the walls shimmered with faint reflections, like water remembering old ripples. Harry walked to the bookshelf, newly rearranged. It now displayed books with titles he didn't recognize, but when he opened one, he saw pages filled with half-faded writing, notes of students from decades, even centuries ago. Some were in ink, others in magical script that shimmered and reformed with each breath. One page caught his eye. "If someone finds this place, be kind to it. We made it not to hide, but to heal." Harry closed the book slowly. "This was never meant to be lost," he whispered. "It was meant to be found again by the right hearts." Meanwhile, Ron was inspecting the portraits. Some still slumbered, but one, a painting of a softly lit dormitory common room, seemed to blink awake. The figure in it, a young boy with curly hair and a kind smile, looked up at Ron as if greeting an old friend. Ron cleared his throat. Do you live here?" The portrait boy nodded, then gestured with a tilt of his head toward a desk in the corner. Curious, Ron walked over and found a chess set. Not ordinary wizard chess, but a delicate handcrafted set carved from silver and obsidian. He touched one of the pawns, and it moved forward softly, as if waiting for his move. As he played a slow game with the enchanted set, the board began to shift, not aggressively, but in patterns. Messages began to appear as the pieces moved, not in letters, but in images. A student crying alone, another being comforted, the dormitory glowing around them like a protective shield. "This place," Ron said slowly, "it was for those who didn't fit in any one place, who needed somewhere that didn't belong to a house or a rule or a badge, just somewhere to rest." Meanwhile, Hermione found a small hallway she hadn't noticed before. She turned to the others. "I'm going to see where this leads." Harry nodded. "Be careful." The passage was narrow, lined with magical sconces that lit softly as she walked. At the end, a room, circular, glowing blue. In the center stood a pedestal with a magical quill hovering above parchment. She stepped closer. The parchment read, "To remember this dormitory, leave behind a truth." Hermione stood still for a long while. Then, slowly, she picked up the quill and wrote, "I was afraid of being alone until I understood I never truly was." The quill glowed. The parchment folded itself neatly and disappeared into the pedestal. The room pulsed with a soft hum. Acceptance. Back in the dormitory, Harry had found another change. The silver drawer, once locked and sealed, was now slightly ajar. Inside, a mirror, not like the mirror of Erised, but simple, round, and edged in runes. He picked it up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his own reflection smiled, his real smile, not the practiced one he gave others. Around the edges of the reflection, faint ghost images of himself flickered, younger, older, worried, brave. A soft voice, not spoken, but sensed, whispered through the glass. You are not defined by your battles. You are shaped by what you love. Harry exhaled and set the mirror down. This place, it sees who we are underneath everything else. Ron, who had stopped playing, walked over to join him. And it doesn't judge, he said. It just offers comfort. Hermione returned quietly. Her face was thoughtful, touched with emotion. I think this room chooses people not because they're strong, but because they need gentleness. They sat together for a long while. No puzzles left to solve that night. Just a sense that their choices, their truths, had added something to the room, as though the dormitory grew stronger, more present, each time someone understood its kindness. When they finally left, the door didn't vanish instantly. It lingered, as if watching them go, then faded like a breath on glass. Later, as they settled into their real dormitories, sleep came softly, no longer interrupted by dreams of battles, but instead wrapped in the hush of memory and light. The kind of sleep that healed, for tomorrow the dormitory would wait again, patient, quiet, kind, and the choice to return would always be theirs. The days passed with a dreamy rhythm, and though the mystery of the hidden dormitory had softened into something comforting, its final secret still waited patiently beneath its quiet walls. It was nearly the end of term when the trio returned once more to the hidden corridor. The castle outside felt colder now, wrapped in the hush of approaching winter. The portraits had begun wearing scarves. The staircases groaned a little more as they shifted. Candles flickered lower, slower, as if Hogwarts itself was preparing to sleep. The familiar door appeared just as gently as before, nestled between two dark stone pillars. But this time, when Harry touched the doorknob, it felt warmer, inviting. Inside, the dormitory was unchanged at first glance. Beds tucked neatly, fireplace glowing. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and aged parchment, but there was something new. The room was quieter than ever before, not empty, but waiting, a soft hum in the walls, a sense that something had noticed them. Hermione was the first to speak. There's something different tonight, like the dormitory is listening more closely. Harry nodded, eyes drawn to the far wall. The portraits were all awake now, watching, not with suspicion, but with something closer to pride. Figures in them leaned forward slightly, like students listening to a favorite professor. Ron, a bit unsettled, pointed, "Look at that one." In the largest portrait frame above the fireplace, a new image had appeared. It was of the very room they stood in, painted perfectly, like a mirror, but in the center of the painting sat a single student, curled up, hands folded, eyes red from crying, but the faintest smile just forming. "It's someone who was here," Hermione whispered. "Someone this room helped." As they stepped closer, soft light blossomed from the base of the walls, runic patterns pulsing gently beneath the stone. A quiet breath of wind stirred the pages of an old journal on the table, flipping them open to a glowing entry. Harry leaned over and read aloud. "We made this room because no other place saw us, so we made a place that would, not just for us, but for whoever came after." May they never feel as alone as we did. He paused, his voice almost caught in his throat. May they never feel as alone as we did. The room responded, not loudly, not with magic flaring, but with warmth. The fireplace flared golden, the beds shimmered like memories returning, and then, from the center of the room, the floor began to glow, not burn, not crack, just glow. A circle of light appeared, and within it, a figure, not a ghost, not an illusion, but something in between, a memory brought to life. It was a young girl wearing robes from another era. Her hair was short, her eyes bright. She looked around as though surprised, then smiled at them. I wondered when someone would finally ask. Hermione gasped softly. You were one of the founders of the dormitory? The girl nodded. My name was Ilara. I was a Ravenclaw, but more than that, I was alone. My housemates were kind, but I never quite fit. I loved riddles no one asked, books no one borrowed. I saw the cracks between spells and wondered what they meant. She walked slowly around the room, her fingers brushing the edges of furniture like an old friend returning home. I met others like me. From every house, we were the ones who needed quiet more than celebration, understanding more than glory. We built this place in secret, not to defy the castle, but to give it balance. Harry asked softly, "Why now? Why show yourself to us?" Ilara looked at them, her gaze deep and warm. Because you listened. You didn't come here to solve or own. You came with wonder, with care. That's the key this room has always waited for. She turned to the journal on the table. With a wave of her hand, the entries fluttered to a blank page. It is time, she said, for this dormitory to be remembered again. She handed Harry a new quill, glowing faintly at the tip. He stepped forward slowly, heart pounding with emotion he didn't expect. On the page, he wrote, "We found this room not through power, but through kindness. We didn't fix it. It healed us." Hermione added her line beneath his. Some magic is quiet, but it lasts longer than any spell. Ron, after a long pause, wrote his own words. This place knew what we needed before we did. As the last word settled into the parchment, the entire room pulsed with light, gentle, golden, and warm. Portraits smiled, the beds glowed brighter, and from the far wall a new door appeared. It didn't lead out, it led deeper. Ilara stepped aside. This is the true heart of the dormitory, but only those who understand it can open it. Harry looked at Hermione and Ron. They nodded. He opened the door. Inside was not another room, but a collection of them, a hidden archive filled with journals, portraits, spells not of power, but of peace, names of students long gone, their truths, their hopes, their fears. Ilara's voice drifted in behind them. Every time someone finds this place, it grows. Every time someone feels seen here, its magic deepens. Hermione's eyes glistened. We're part of it now. You always were, said Ilara, and with that, her figure faded, softly, gently, as if going to rest again. The trio stood in the quiet, surrounded by the dreams of those who came before and the memories they now carried forward. They didn't need to speak. The dormitory had told its story, and they had become part of it. As the final echoes of the room's memory drifted away like soft mist over the lake, the dormitory that wasn't there began to fade, slowly, gently, as though exhaling its long-held secrets. The walls, once aglow with ancient warmth and watching portraits, began to dim. Candles that had hovered in midair flickered softly, bowing out like tired dancers at the end of a performance. The beds, the books, the window with its impossible view, all of it shimmered, then gradually became translucent until it seemed made of moonlight itself. Harry stood still for a long moment. His fingers brushed the place where the enchanted memory had touched his shoulder, now cool and quiet. The journal in his hand remained, the one the room had shown him. It was not glowing anymore. It simply looked well used, faded corners, ink smudged by time and tears. He could still feel the warmth it once held, but now it pulsed with calmness instead of mystery. He turned slowly, and the invisible door behind him creaked open of its own accord. The corridor on the other side had changed too. Morning had arrived. The heavy hush of night was gone, replaced with the golden hush of early light. It poured through the high stained glass windows, painting the stone floor with patterns of soft color, reds and blues and greens that moved like ripples across the hall. As Harry stepped through, the door behind him closed without a sound. But when he glanced back, it wasn't there. Just a blank stone wall, smooth and undisturbed. Still, the weight in his chest had lifted. The ache he didn't know he had been carrying felt lighter. He felt something between peace and understanding, like waking from a dream that somehow solved a riddle you didn't know was in your heart. The castle was quiet, but alive, as if it too had listened to the story that unfolded and was now gently at rest again. Harry walked back toward the common room, holding the journal close, the same way he might hold a letter from someone long gone but never forgotten. As he turned a corner, a feather drifted down in front of him, pale white and soft. It floated lazily through the sunbeams and came to rest on the windowsill where his journey had begun. He smiled. Later that morning, tucked in bed once more, Harry curled beneath the covers with the journal resting beside him. Outside, the sun was still gentle, filtered through the leaves that whispered in the breeze. The dormitory was still. His dormitory, the one that was real. And as sleep tugged at his eyes again, he whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." Far below the tower, behind the wall where no door could be found, the forgotten dormitory lingered for just a heartbeat more, glowing softly in the silence. And then it waited, as it always had and always would, until someone else needed it.